welcome to another episode of the Ryan Holtz Show Podcast. Listen, we have an absolute treat. If it wasn't for you, our listeners, our audience, we would not be one of the best shows in the world, bringing you some of the best guests. But listen, we never split the difference. We have one of the most incredible human beings on the planet. Smooth. His name is Chris Voss, former lead FBI hostage negotiator, author of one of the most incredible books, amazing speaker. We're going to get all kinds of things. Chris, welcome home. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Chris, I want to open up by just saying, listen, I think the most expensive thing we are paying for is what we don't know. The biggest debt we pay for this is ignorance. What would you say to that?
Yeah, well, there's an awful, I agree completely. And at the same time, it's hard to know everything. So curiosity ends up being a superpower that gets us through in the meantime.
You said this quote and you said, it's not a sin to not get the deal. It is a sin to take a long time to not get the deal. And I think, and I watched this interview that you did, and I that statement alone, I feel is philosophical and can almost go through almost all of life. Meaning, how long are we staying in relationships personally that maybe we should get out of? How long are we in business partnerships that maybe we should have turfed a long time ago? Can you unpack that statement? Because I feel like when I read this book, that statement really encompasses what's going on in here.
Yeah, really true. And, it's kind of a two-way street on that. A friend of mine, Joe Polish, runs an outfit called Genius Network. He says, there's two kinds of people that you could deal with, elf and half. Elf is easy, lucrative, and fun. And half is hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. And he says, cut the halves out of your life and deal with the elves, because the halves are standing in the way of the elves. So, point of fact, and that being a two-way street, I mean, somebody that you're having trouble with is holding you back. It's taking you a long time to get the deal with, because they're annoying, lame, or frustrating. The reality is you might be annoying, lame, and frustrating for them too. So you're actually probably doing them a favor by clearing them out of your life. Let them move on to somebody that's a better fit for them, just like somebody else is a better fit for you. And in point of fact, the people that are creating all this friction in your business relationships and your business deals, it's hard to get a deal with somebody. They're standing in the way of the people that you could be interacting with. There isn't this big gap behind them. There's actually a lot of people behind them that are great matches for you that they're obscuring. So if in relationship or, a business relationship, personal relationship, if it's really annoying, lame, and frustrating, and it's taking you a long time to get to where you want to go, it ain't your fault. It's probably just a bad match. It's nobody's fault. It's just a bad match. I got asked on a podcast a long time ago, are you divorced? If you're divorced, how could you be such a great negotiator?
Yes.
And the reality was, we were a bad match ultimately. She had different values than I did. There was nothing wrong with her values. It just wasn't a great fit. And so it's no bad on either side if you're not a great match. So release them into the wild.
Listen, I think we live in a world where I call you a 10-gallon person, meaning you're big. You have a lot of energy. You have this insatiable curiosity. Everything in your story is all about learning. Like one thing I don't think people touch on a lot about you. Well, maybe a couple have it that I've watched, but they don't touch on how much you love to learn. And how really freaking curious you are. Like you're like this child in a man's body that's you're just taking it all in. Can you speak to your just innate ability for consistently wanting to learn?
Yeah. I don't know where. I think I always liked to read. I remember when I was a kid, I read comic books. I remember in elementary school being in the book club, the weekly book club. My parents would actually limit how many books I could order because I think they were worried that, I'd order a bunch of books and not read them. But I always loved to read. And I'm seeing that show up on a consistent basis. Like it is so much fun. There's so much cool stuff to learn. I interviewed Mark Cuban just a couple of days ago on this interactive subscription service that we run called Fireside. It's an interactive podcast.
Yes.
So, I get a chance. It's a brand new app. It's really, really cool.
Is this similar to Clubhouse at all, or a little different? I haven't really touched into the fireside much yet.
I would say that take Clubhouse, and add in everything that you would want. Interactive, put video on it.
Got it.
And a bunch of other stuff, because I think both Mark and Fallon Fatamy, the founders of it, saw Clubhouse and thought about, well, what are its shortcomings? What about this doesn't work for us? Let's build the next generation. And since he's a founder and I'm on it, I got a chance to interview him. And of course, the people that are watching, they got a chance to ask him questions directly themselves.
Huge.
But Mark and I got onto this topic of learning, and he's just an example. Like I remember him saying, I think the dude reads 5 hours a day.
Jeez.
You want to really take your life to the next level. You got to soak up the good stuff.
Yes.
The stuff that gives you perspective and insight.
Yes.
And so, I love it. I mean, and I'm turned on to most of the people that are advancing the knowledge of the human race, if you will.
Yes. Yes. So I really want to use this interview for a little bit different, because I want to take what you've done and really put it into micro situations in life. And we own a business and we do all that stuff. But what do we do when we are interacting with people who we say, look, we are way more emotionally intelligent? If we look at the brain, right? Amygdala, emotion, right? Prefrontal cortex, decision-making. We can agree that most people we run into, a lot of them, they're not self-aware. They're just kind of existing. And so when you say the words tactical empathy, how could you educate our listeners to, I guess, be a little more patient with the people they're dealing with, but also understand where those people are coming from in order to deploy some of these tactics of negotiating? You talk about labels, mirroring, no-oriented questions. These things are incredible, but where do we find the patience to deploy these when we know we're dealing with people that maybe they're just not awake right now?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to shut off these. I'm trying to shut off these dings.
That's okay. That's okay. I got you. It might be me. I was dinging you, so it might be me.
I can't. This keeps showing up on my computer, and I haven't figured out how to show the alerts up. All right, so I mean, self-awareness. There's a bit of a virtual circle. There's something called negative emotion differentiation, or NET. The more synonyms you can think of for the negative emotions that you see in other people, that helps you. It increases your emotional intelligence, and it also starts to lead to your own self-awareness. So, how many different synonyms can you think of for angry or mild anger, like concern? Anxiety is a form of anger.
Yes.
Apprehension. When Joe Polish talked about hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating, I remember thinking, all right, so each one of those is a different negative emotion. What's it a result of? And we started to break it out because we wanted to make the strategy operational. Like, for example, if you're frustrated, that's about being held back from a goal in the future. It's a future-oriented negative emotion. If you're annoyed, it's something that's already happened. So that's a past-oriented negative emotion. So when you start to think about these things and you start seeing it in others, then lo and behold, suddenly like, all right, so these are the things that I'm feeling. And these are the things that I'm, because if I'm frustrated, it's about I'm being denied a goal in the future. I can reorient my thinking. If I'm annoyed, it's something that's happened to me in the past. Anger is about something that's happened to you. And I was lucky enough to hear a sort of a private conversation that from Brene Brown's. First time I'd ever heard her talk. First time I'd ever heard her being involved at all in anything. And next thing I know, I'm in a room with her, and she's giving an intimate private conversation. And she said that self-actualization requires self-awareness first. So 100%. if you work on becoming self-aware, then the next step to making yourself better, smarter, faster flows a lot easier. You gotta kind of be aware what's going on in your own cranium, between your own ears, if you want to improve how you're impacting the world, how you live in your life, how much you enjoy in your life.
I think that's it's remarkable. Framing the question, you know, a lot of people, I mean, maybe even majority still, anybody who hasn't read this book, you know, they still ask a lot of questions with the goal of getting to yes. And you talk about counterfeit yes all the time, right? And people just kind of give you yes to fluff you off, shut you up, and get you out the door. But you said, look, change those questions to no-oriented questions. Listen, I mean, you need to send me, you got to have your team send me an invoice after this call. I think I've made a lot of dough off of really starting to get to these no-oriented questions. Yeah. Because they're really powerful, because you're trying to get to where this person is in their thought process. Can you speak to, you know, labels, it seems like, looks like, and then oriented questions, and why you use these as tactics?
Yeah, and these are perfectly complementary. I mean, if you use one without the other, you're kind of rowing with one oar. And you got to be careful you don't run in circles a little bit.
Yes.
You know, so no-oriented questions are great at triggering decision and triggering implementation thought process. You know, have you got a few minutes to talk? Is now a bad time to talk.
Yes.
So when the no becomes safety and security, and what happens is when you ask that question, and that's only one example of switching from yes to no, the other person will either say, no, it's not a bad time at all. And they'll be instantly focused. Or if it is a bad time, they'll say, it is a bad time. This is when I can talk. That's implementation. You've triggered a decision as to when they're going to talk to you. They've decided when they're going to talk to you, either now or at a specific date in the future, and they're going to implement if they can't do it right now. And so that's what the no-oriented question does. Is this a bad idea? Are you against? Is it ridiculous? Instead of are you in favor of? Is this a good idea? You know, they can all be switched, but understand the immense power there, and also its limitation. It's triggering a decision and potential implementation. That's not about listening. That's where the labels come in.
Yes.
Now, you don't label the person, you label the emotion.
Yes.
You know, you label the dynamic of the moment.
Yes.
You could even attach an emotion to an anger, to an action. You know, that was an angry thing. It seems like that was an angry thing to do. It seems like hanging up on them was an angry thing to do. You know, it's the equivalent of the advice that we got a long time ago, separate the person from the emotion. Well, you know, you're not really separating them. You're just choosing which you can observe. You know, seems like you're a jerk. That's labeling the person. Seems like you're narrow-minded. You know, it's calling a name in the guise of a label.
Yes.
But it seems like you have a reason for saying that. You know, that's a whole different kind of label.
Sure.
Labeling really dials you in. Labeling gives you insight. You know, one of my favorite examples of phenomenal insight that come from a succession of labels, and usually it's like the second or third label where you get some real insight. A friend of mine here in Las Vegas is the assistant sheriff, Sasha Larkin. She's walking around, management by walking around, which needs to be done in any bureaucracy. It's very helpful.
Yep.
She's walking around a jail because the sheriff runs a jail. You know, county jail is always a sheriff, whatever county you're in. And she wants to know from her employees, how could she make their lives better? You know, how do we value more? And she's hearing consistently that they, of all things, they want 2-ply toilet paper. And, you know, and what I love about this is a reason why you should walk around and start feeling people out, because nobody's ever going to put that on paper.
Yeah.
And no leader in a leadership meeting is ever going to say, you know what? I got a brilliant idea. Let's give our employees better toilet paper. Like no manager's ever going to say that.
Yeah.
But she's walking around. She said, it seems like the fact that you guys don't have 2-ply toilet paper seems like that makes you feel unappreciated. Bang, hits a mark. Hits a mark. And then she's thinking, because they give single-ply toilet paper to the inmates. Everybody's sharing the same toilet paper in a jail. And she says to him, it seems like the fact that we give you the same toilet paper as the inmates, we're equating you to the inmates.
Ooh.
Like, bang, that's an insight.
Ooh.
And that was a home run. Now that's her second observation, verbal label of the dynamic, not the first. And once you start labeling, the other side loves it. It makes them feel heard. It triggers rapport, but it makes you think. It's a version of reasoning and analysis. And I've seen time after time the real breakthroughs just come through the second or third label. Now, again, and I think about this. The sheriff is never going to give a manager, an innovation award for giving their employees better toilet paper. And again, if they'd have been brainstorming in a management meeting, if anybody would have suggested that, they'd have laughed them out of the room. In point of fact, it becomes one of the most insightful breakthroughs in the communication. And so the obvious stuff is always not so obvious. The simplest stuff that has the greatest impact, the black swans, the tiny little things that make the biggest difference to the other side. That was a negotiation. And she's out there, she's just listening and labeling, and bang, she hits it on the second label. That ain't a no-oriented question. A no-oriented question is triggering decision. Labeling is you making you smarter in the moment by actually listening.
You think it's a form of seduction in a way? Let's be honest, right?
I think, there's a lot of these communication skills that have a tendency to overlap.
Yes.
What's the difference between seduction and romance? Where are you going with it, right?
You're talking to me, Chris. You're talking to me. Be careful. You're right. I mean, there's a form of seduction in all this, right? And I mean,
probably is.
Well, and you look at the wordplay, right? It's because I've literally deployed these tactically without trying to sound like a robot. And as you know, you said, look, the first time you start using some of this, it's going to not be as, normal to nature, so to speak. But once you start kind of getting into that rhythm, it sounds, but you really got to start listening. And then you're like, oh my God, this works. Because I find even in business or personal, for me, I'm just trying to get somebody to really understand from their perspective where they're at, where the obstacle is, where the objection is, right? And take them down. And some people, they just lack that critical thought. So I'm trying to get them to have that forward thought. And so for me, those no-oriented questions really help kind of get me to them to think that forward motion.
It does very much. And that's the implementation that we were just talking about. Forward motion is about implementation. So what's it going to take to get this deal done? Yes. Or you can flip it and you say, what's standing in the way of getting the deal done? Those are two vastly different thought processes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and we spend a lot of time working on problems that don't exist in deals a lot of the time. Right? So, I mean, I really feel that because, you figure out, wait a sec, that wasn't even the problem. It turned out that Randy didn't like the smell of my cologne and I was never getting this thing done anyway. Like, it could be, have you seen any, especially with Black Swan, because you're consulting so many businesses, what would you say is the most ironic or just crazy small detail that you just thought this deal didn't get done over the, maybe lack of better words, the stupidest, smallest oversight? Have you seen anything that just literally made you laugh?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because, you're asking me about what caused the deal not to get done that didn't happen. The nice thing about being in hostage negotiation and learning about, the real human dynamics on both sides is every hostage negotiation that I was ever in, we'd ultimately find out everything that happened on the other side. You got witnesses, you got follow-on, you got intelligence agencies giving us intel. And that's when we really got a 360-degree view of human nature decision-making. And, unfortunately, in the business deals, we kind of don't, not only do we not have that these days, but actually we're much quicker to walk away from deals. Like, the elf half thing that I was talking about before, a half shows up for us. If you do business with a half, you're taking at least a 50% cut in pay right off the bat. Because it's going to take you twice as long to get everything done.
Yes, huge.
That double your time for the same amount of pay, that's a 50% cut in pay.
100%.
And so we have a tendency to walk away from deals real early on when there's a bad match.
Yes. FBI hostage negotiator. I mean, technically, you're a purebred cop. I mean, deep down, you're still got that blood flowing through you. So I always wonder, because I got some cop friends that would say,
I bleed blue.
Yeah, when you guys pull up to go for dinner, are you running plates outside, making sure what's going on inside? You feel like you sit down, or you're in an interrogation that you didn't know you were in. Like, but jokes aside, how did you find the transition going from being an FBI hostage negotiator into now being an entrepreneur running a business? And I know your son Jason is partners,
Brandon, my son
Brandon.
Yeah.
And so you guys are running the Black Swan group together. What was some of the challenges that you had? And then what were some of the things that you thought, geez, this is a breeze?
Well, the two biggest things coming out of government into public sector to private sector.
Huge.
And for me, and people in the public sector look at the private sector and think they understand it, and vice versa. That is not the case.
Yes.
People in the public sector are not really good at just, understanding that you got to get paid. Yeah. You're in sales almost all the time. And, because you got to keep the lights on. You got other people you got to look out for. Yes. Like when I was an FBI hostage negotiator, I didn't have to worry about making sure that we made enough money so that everybody on my team got paid. The secretaries, the schedulers, the tremendous amount of back office people that are involved in government operations. The government was taking care of the pay on that and loosely looking at the return on investment. And so, getting it, so then asking for money, and for me personally, in the public sector, that always kind of felt dirty. And
huge.
Now I had to learn for it not to be anything to be ashamed of. Like, we got to get paid. Like, it's going to cost me money to do this. It's going to cost me time. Like, and here's the price, and we're going to stick to the price. So getting really comfortable with that, and which is why I think, there ain't a general out there. High-level government officials do not make it in the private sector. They all come out with very big fanfare. They're used to having a big staff around them. They'll negotiate for personnel, but they'll never negotiate for money. Like, pick a big name military general made a very big splash. And they ain't one of them out there successfully running a consulting company for more than a year or so. So, asking for money is hard. Now, the next thing, which might be harder, the degree of indictable level lying that is engaged in the private sector now for two vastly different reasons.
Chris, can you break that down into layman's terms? That sounded a little can you break that down into that? Break that down, what you just said, a little further. I want to wrap my head around that, just for our listeners, because what you said there, that's powerful.
Yeah, well, so if you lie during an investigation, it's actually a crime in and of itself.
Yeah.
It's a U.S. Code 18,001, lying to the FBI. You lie to me. You've committed a crime.
Yes.
Now, if you're lying to me, you're probably lying to me in order to cover up another crime that you've committed.
Yes.
So these are lies coming from a bad place. Now, in a private sector,
yes,
people are lying out of defensiveness because they don't know how to break bad news. They don't know how to tell the truth. They got a problem they're having trouble solving, and so really, the largely acceptable level of lying, it's not coming from a malicious place. It's defensive in nature. They're trying to solve a problem they haven't solved yet, or they're backed into a corner in a particular business deal. And so, deception by omission or deception by the literal truth is rampant, not for, malicious reasons, but out of defensiveness. We're actually talking to a company in Western Europe a couple of months ago. And we went through an exercise, the 60 seconds so she dies. I need a car in 60 seconds so she dies exercise that we put everybody through. And we tell people up front, like, you can't give the bad guy a car. There's 4 things you can't do. One of the things you can't do is give him a car. So right away, the bad guy says, I need a car in 60 seconds so she dies. And a real common response is, all right, so it's going to take me longer in 60 seconds. Let me work on that. Well, that's a lie.
Yes.
But the person, and we ask people, like, all right, so are you ever going to give up a car? And they're like, well, No. So then when you said you need more time, that's a lie, right?
Mm.
So, and that's an example, like somebody gets backed into a corner, they don't know how to tell the truth. They don't know how to, without causing a relationship to be over. They feel they're at a point that they can't get over it. There's a book called Negotiations out there, written by one of my Harvard colleagues.
Ooh.
And there's a story of a company that's holding an auction for whatever they were auctioning off. You know, they invited bidders in. They kept all the bidders separate. You know, they kept them in different rooms and different places. And as it turned out, only one bidder showed up. So an executive from the company that's holding the auction has a personal relationship with the executive from the bidding company. And because of the personal relationship, the bidder says, look, you got to tell me where we are. You got to give me some context here. I got to know what's going on. This is important to me. And so the company holding the auction says, well, I can tell you this. You're the low bidder. That was literally true.
Yeah. Wow.
And massively deceptive.
Wow. Absolutely.
And because the auctioning company, they feel backed into a corner. They're like, this is a disaster. I convinced my bosses to hold an auction. We got one bidder. If this blows up, I'm going to lose my job. Like it's somebody who doesn't know how to tell the truth out of defensiveness. This is, it in fact, has a very negative impact on the other side. But where was the guy on the one side go, well, you're the low bidder.
But
that's the kind of deception that occurs in the private sector constantly.
To interject though, if you think, okay, this person's lying because they're being defensive, if you really rewind that back though, it's like, okay, why are they being defensive? Then you start going down the track record all the way deep into their childhood and you figure out this person, maybe wasn't taught. Like, think about the school system. They don't teach you any of this stuff. I mean, this stuff is gold, right? The average adult doesn't even know how revolving credit works on their credit card if you really break it down for them, right? So what would you say to people that, if you, like, for example, if you walked into a classroom full of, we'll get to the professor, I'll call you Professor Voss, because I know there's a whole joke behind that. But if you walk into a classroom of grade 8s and they're in grade 8 and they say, hi, Professor Voss, explain to us what you do for a living. How would you unpack that for them so that they could understand that in kind of bite-sized way? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I'd start by saying I teach great collaboration. I teach, the value of long-term relationships through collaboration, and great communication skills that work for you that satisfy the two aspects of you. A great negotiation skill, if it makes the missionary in you satisfied and the mercenary in you satisfied. The Black Swan Method, tactical empathy, is the best negotiation strategy out there, period. It works better than anything else. It's not perfect. It just works better than anything else. Across the board, best chance of success, tactical empathy, nothing comes close. So the mercenary in you wants it because it works.
Do you ever get any colleagues? Sorry, do you ever get any colleagues that kind of razzle you about this book saying, hey, Chris, you're making our job a little harder in terms of interrogation? Because this stuff, I mean, you look at it, if the average police officer walks up and says, hey, it's like, hey, it seems like you got a reason for saying that. Like, sorry, it's just crazy to me.
Yeah, no. Good communication. Like if you got a problem with the communication method, it's more about why you're using it as opposed to what what are your motivations? Like, a scalpel in one person's hand saves a life, in another person's hand, it's a murder weapon. So
true. Tactical
empathy also is great for relationships. I mean, feeling understood, feeling heard. The recipient of that feels cared for. They feel compassion. It's a compassionate thing to do. You don't necessarily have to have compassion for them. And it turns out to be a very compassionate thing to do. Some very fine lines here. And so it satisfies the missionary in you because it's actually good for them to make them feel understood.
Absolutely. You go back to the word, I mean, this is such a big word, is ashamed and then asking for money in your transition going from private to public to private. This is anybody who's getting into business, I mean, a lot of people, when they hear that first no come down the drain, it just destroys them. And, if you're in business, you're going to be hearing some no's, right? And that's just the reality of it.
Or rejections. Now, let's adjust. Let's call, because no doesn't always equate to rejection. You get a lot of rejections.
True. Yes, lots of rejection. What would you say? And I always say, like, if you don't want to ask, sometimes you got to ask. And you said, look, I got no problem asking for money, but a lot of people do. How did you go from that kind of, hey, I got everything paid for because I got the FBI, to now, hey, wait a sec, closed mouths don't get fed, so to speak.
Yeah.
How did you really kind of cross over into your brain to say, I don't need to feel ashamed. I got bills to pay here. We need to make money. Yeah,
well, we in the early days, we're out giving a lot of free negotiation training samples.
Yeah.
And that was all we were doing, and assuming that, they'd see how powerful this was. I mean, I remember giving a training session in a company to a bunch of their people, and the people we gave the session to walked us upstairs to their executives and said, this stuff we got to have more of this. And we never got anything out of it. We did it for free.
Yeah.
Never got paid. So then as we continue to do some of that stuff for free, then I thought, all right, so there are all kinds of compensation. We can't not get paid. So we started taking email addresses and signing people up for our free newsletter, which we still have to this day. We got a complimentary newsletter called The Edge. You can go on our website, Black Swan Ltd, to subscribe. It's free.
Yes.
It's concise. It's actionable.
Yes.
But then I thought, okay, so how do we make sure we get some form of compensation? And so we started there. And then I got to the point where when we really started quantifying the value of this, like I've had clients tell me now that we could never pay you what this has been worth. I got a client last year made an $800,000 difference in his annual profit based on a Black Swan method. And he said, I can never pay you that, but that's not his profit. That was the increase, the delta. The increase was $800,000. So when we firmly grasped that whatever they paid us, it was going to be a bargain, then we understood the emotionally intelligent way to pitch it. And, you asked me what it cost to come to one of my training sessions. I'm going to say a lot. A lot.
Yeah.
When people call and ask us, what's it cost to hire us? We say a lot more than you've ever spent. Because we know that our price tag is still a fraction of what it's worth if they implement. And so coming to grips with satisfying that your product is worth it. That if you deliver fully on what you promised, and there's a critical issue there, is your product worth it? Then your product is a bargain. As long as you're not selling snake oil, and we are not selling snake oil. We got another client made an $8 million difference in one transaction.
Wow.
And on a small level, let's say you don't have $12 million deals that could go either for 4 or 12. Let's say on a regular basis, what are your costs on a daily basis of being a poor negotiator? How much, just switching from yes to no, I can promise an immediate 23% increase in your effectiveness.
Yes.
So whatever you're making for a living, what would giving yourself an instantaneous 23% raise do for your life? Stuff like that. Understanding the real value of tactical empathy and the application of the Black Swan method.
What would you say is the number one? I mean, everything you're talking about, business 101 too, is what problem are you solving for people? And usually the bigger the problem, the more you could make, right? What is the single problem that Black Swan solves for companies? If you could get it down to one problem, AKA, what's that brand story? What's that brand message?
Yeah, the cost of miscommunication is, and the cost of wasted time. It's not a sin to not get the deal. It's a sin to take a long time to not get the deal. Like, how much of your time do you get back if we could teach you right away to figure out? I could teach you in a half an hour to figure out how to fix. It's going to take me more than a half an hour to teach you this, but in a half an hour with a client, you're going to figure out whether or not you're never going to get the deal, or whether or not it's going to take you a long time to get a bad deal. And then move on instead of chasing a deal that's either going to be bad or you're never going to get for 6, 8, 10 months.
Oof. What do you think? I mean, you're all over the internet. Holy moly. I mean, digital marketing, branding, like you leave no stone unturned. So if we were to go back to like, I don't know, pre-Facebook days, 1993 or something like that, I mean, you've seen so much in the course of your life and so much transition and change, both personal, professionally. What has the internet and kind of the ecosystem of getting your message out in terms of value and education meant, not only for yourself as Chris Voss and sharing your story and expertise, but also Black Swan? How much has that played a role in that journey?
Yeah, I think it's been fantastic because, it's an acceleration across the board. Like we got, when I first was coming out of the FBI, I had a guy that was mailing out a monthly newsletter, hard copy.
Yeah.
And he was making a good living doing it. It was great information. As soon as we moved into digital, now we're doing the same thing once a week, and we don't got to mail it. It's come on the internet. So there's an acceleration. I heard somebody, Mark Andreessen on Lex Fridman podcast recently was talking about how all the new media is just an acceleration of the old media. They've taken the most previous version of the media and they just made it more effective, more efficient. And it was, and I never thought about that till I laid it out like that. Like Chat GPT is no different than Google search. It's just, you do a Google search now, you got 10, 11, 12, 15 websites to look at. Chat GPT looks at them for you and gives you the information back on. So it's just an acceleration of Google search. So, it's all simply an acceleration of what we've already known.
People are doing a lot of business in lead generation in the DMs on social media. And I'm sure, companies and whatnot. In your opinion, if you're trying to nurture a lead through DM, are you trying to get that person on the phone? Or are you keeping it in the DMs? Like, do you see a lot of this in some senses where you're saying to people, maybe don't try to sell in the DMs, try to get them on the phone? Like, if we start applying this, because it's really interesting, people DM all the time. And I love what you said, because one of the questions I can't stand, and I opened up by asking you, and I just want to see if you bite on it, but you didn't, is how are you?
Oh, I hate that.
I mean, the average person does not give a shit how I'm doing. And I did a whole post on how are you and the psychology. But I love what you said. And I watched the thing and you're explaining it. And I said, what's the answer? And you said, it seems like you got a place you want to start. Right?
Exactly.
And I've used that before. And it takes the whole person's demeanor and just, they wash out. And it's like, either they just completely crap their pants, or they're like, actually, I do got a place I want to start. And you just bypass all the BS. Right. What would you say for never split the difference in these tactics? Kind of implementing them through, social and DMs. Do we want to just, hey, get them on the phone, let's talk to them? Or do you say, hey, you know what? We can marinate these tactics, in some good old fashioned DMs.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we like all forms, DMs, emails, phone calls. Look at them as complementary. Don't try to live exclusively in one. And then don't be lazy about it. Like I'm going to get a long message on LinkedIn or, in a maybe even a text, it's got 15 points in. I mean, come on. Like, I'm not going to read that.
Yeah.
A lot of people are doing it because they're lazy. They're going to construct this long sales pitch and they're going to copy and paste it into 1,000 people. There's no distinguishing. It's like trying to play chess and put in all your moves for the entire game into one communication. If you start to look at this as complementary, and the funny thing about it is, so many people send long messages that they hate reading. Yes. Which side of this baby are you on? And people send stuff out that they hate to read.
Of course.
So if you're being lazy, then you run into trouble with DMs and emails.
Yes.
But if you take the time and allow it to be complimentary, let it move forward one move at a time, you're going to find you get to where you want to go much quicker.
You find people really stay behind sometimes they stay behind that though. For example, I think we live in this age where we have technology where even when I wanted to have you as a guest on the show, and this has kind of been an interesting journey, you're a hard guy to get, but I don't know what happened. I think I kind of screwed up midway because you actually did respond and it's like I didn't respond. I went back in the message. I'm like, holy crap, he already responded like 6 months ago. And then anyways, we got it done. But I flipped the camera around and said, Chris, listen, man, this is right. Like, I really because I want you to see my tonality. I want you to see my energy. And I want you to see if I'm just some crazy person or not. And so I think that as much emotion as you can put in is huge. But if we go down the chain of command in terms of DMs and kind of staying on that, let's just say digital forefront, what would you say if we got somebody who is up here, there's levels to the game, right? And then you got somebody that's down here and they're saying, look, I want to really get this person that's up here. There's a value gap here, but I still think that this person, they need something. Even you yourself, you need resources. I don't think you'll ever say no to somebody who could maybe give you a great resource or something. How do we figure out what that person needs? Is there little tactics that we can use? I call it working the perimeter. So if I'm not going to talk to Chris directly, I want to figure out who the heck his son is. I want to figure out what's going on, who cuts his hair. He likes a steakhouse. I mean, I'm going to come and work it like a basketball court, and I want to work the perimeter. Is there any tactics that you think, especially for people listening, saying, hey, I'm starting out, Chris, how can I show I want to give value when I don't really know?
By giving value. Yes. Start out by giving value. Because otherwise you're reaching out to me. You're reaching out to me with your hand out. Hey, hire me. Ooh. Hey, let me say you something.
Ooh.
You're reaching out to me with your hand out. I mean, or you're gonna talk to me about the information you may have figured out about me personally, and then you're gonna reach your hand out. Deliver something first. Deliver some insight. Deliver not an idea. There's a big difference between an idea and an insight. Huge. Ideas are a dime a dozen. I heard him say on Shark Tank one time, maybe a great idea might be worth $20. $20 might get you breakfast. $20 doesn't take you far. Now, there's a difference between an idea and an insight. Show me you got insight into a problem that I'm struggling with. Show me you got insight into something that's valuable to me. I mean, stop trying to figure out where my kids went to school or where I went to school or where I grew up. Talk about, sharing insight with me or a plan. There's a really interesting book called by Ryan Holiday called Conspiracy.
Ooh, Ego's the
There was Peter Thiel is looking to take down one of those. He's got a grudge against Gawker. And a number of years ago, there was a $100 million lawsuit by Hulk Hogan against Gawker over an illegally obtained sex tape that was humiliating to him. He was trapped. He had no idea he was being filmed. I mean, everything bad about this possible, and it bankrupted Gawker. Well, Thiel, as per the book Conspiracy, or Thiel, and forgive me for if I mispronounce his name, he funded that because he got approached by a young man. I assume it was a man. They referred to him in the book as Mr. X, as yet unidentified.
Wow. And
Mr. X showed up and did what's called a briefcase interview. He said, look, I know you have this issue with Gawker. I know you think they're unscrupulous and unethical. And consequently, because of the harm they're doing to you and other people, you want to make them pay. So here's the plan. And he laid out something that's called a briefcase interview, pulled out his briefcase, said, here's the plan of how you do it. Here's a budget of how it gets done. Here's how you cross the battlefield to get to the objective that you want. Thiel hired him on the spot because he showed up with a plan to solve a problem. He didn't say, I got a great idea. He said, here's a plan to solve the problem that you have. And the mere fact, Warren Buffett says an idiot with a plan beats a genius with a great idea. Show up with a plan that shows some acumen, some insight, some appreciation for the landscape to be crossed. Now you're making a difference, and you get anybody to listen to you. This guy, Thiel didn't even know who this guy was prior to the meeting. He didn't show up and say, "Hey, hire me and I'll figure something out." He said, "No, here's," and he didn't charge him for it either. You give me a consulting fee, put me on retainer and I'll figure it out. He showed up with the plan. And so when you show up with an awareness of what somebody's dealing with and some inkling of how to deal with it, now you're valuable.
Huge. Everybody, please listen to that. Chris, what's your why do you like Oprah Winfrey? What is Oprah doing for you?
She's probably one of the world's, if she's not the world's greatest negotiator, she's close to being it. Like, think about how far has Oprah Winfrey gone in her? Where did she start and where is she? Like, first of all, there aren't that many billionaires at her level at all. Then how many of them are Black females at all? Yeah. And how many of them started in the impoverished circumstances that she started in? I mean, think about the distance that she's covered. No family ties, no family money. Donald Trump started his business career with money the old man gave him. His father was an extremely successful real estate developer in New York City. And he staked Donald. Nobody staked Oprah. So think about how far she's got. Now think about how many people do you know that are mad at Oprah?
Oh, yeah.
Like nobody.
Yeah.
Like every now and then somebody might get into a tiff that kind of maybe sort of people become aware of, but it's not lasting. I mean, Oprah's not feuding with anybody. There ain't no Twitter wars with Oprah. Her focus on relationship. And then I'll layer on top of that, she's dealt with some of the most difficult personalities on planet Earth. I mean, in the entertainment industry, when she built the Oprah show, think of the difficult personalities that were revolving doors in her talk show. And it wasn't easy getting those people in there. You say, she was Oprah. She wasn't always Oprah. At one point in time, she was a Black female from Chicago who didn't have a penny to her name. So think about the ground that she's covered and the premium on relationships and how well regarded she is globally. To me, that's somebody to study and learn from.
Huge. Yeah, no, Oprah's incredible. I see this book behind you, Full Fee Agent. Oh my gosh. Talk to me about that, Chris. Tell me what it's about. Oh, co-authored with Steve Shull, who was coaching residential real estate agents in LA successfully for a long time. Steve was, the fact, logic, and reason, find and grind, hard work kind of guy, made a lot of money in a lot of ways and was helping people. Steve read Never Split the Difference and said, I've been doing this wrong. The key to this is emotional intelligence. We're working too hard. We're making this harder than it is with fact, logic, and reason. Steve reaches out to my son, Brandon. Brandon says, look, you got to talk to this guy. We got to collaborate. Jointly, we started coaching residential real estate agents in the LA area. Wow. And they're changing their lives. They're working 20% as much, making the same amount of money. Yes.
They get and they get evenings and weekends off. Instead of being 24/7 and anxious and getting full fee, sometimes getting more than full fee. Getting paid full fee. And so we did it successfully for so long that we said, look, we got to put this in a book. And it came out last November, and people that follow the patterns as prescribed are having better lives and making more money. The secondary benefit is they're making more money. The principal benefit is they're happy.
Professor Chris Voss, I'm telling you, man, I don't know if you're the mad professor. You're doing all kinds of stuff. You're shifting lanes, going back and forth. I mean, the way your mind works is crazy. I just want to ask you a couple last questions, but the first thing I want to know is, how the heck do you calibrate your day? How do you protect your energy? How are you time blocking what means the most for you? Is there anything weird about you that we don't know? I mean, I know you like the steak and stuff, but is there any little quirks about Chris Voss that you'd like to share with us today?
No, some sort of gratitude exercise every morning is critical. Your default mindset is survival, which is largely negative. You need spiritual hygiene. You need emotional hygiene daily, the same way you need oral hygiene. So because otherwise you fall back into the default survival mode. Success mode and survival mode are not the same thing. So you got to be intentional about positive attitude, about being optimistic, about living in the gain, not in the gap. I mean, there's and it's a constant battle for everybody out there. There isn't anybody that's not working at this all the time. And first thing in the morning is the way you start. You're setting up your day. And I'm both doing a little more, making my gratitude exercise every morning, writing down things I'm grateful for, and simultaneously trying to get my day started with paying attention to myself physically, physical health, physical maintenance to keep your energy level and your mental energy going throughout the course of the day. So the cliche stuff, be grateful, intentional about being grateful, take care of yourself physically. My morning this morning started last night. Get a good night's sleep. You find the super successful people are doing the cliche things.
Yeah. It's true. If you scan Chris Voss's Instagram at the FBI Negotiator, he's also taking his honey bunny up on helicopter rides on the Grand Canyon. I mean, he's doing some experiential type things. Chris, I have a statement here. Though people do business with those they like, know, and trust. Do we agree with that? Like, know, and trust?
That's true, but there's a sequencing here.
Okay.
I don't do business with friends. I become friends with people I do business with. The sequence is, if I'm doing business with you and we can't become friends, then we shouldn't be doing business together. Now, I've lost a lot of friendships from people that I knew from previous lives, FBI hostage negotiators. Every time that my relationship with someone was a friendship first, I've ended up losing a friendship. I am adamantly determined that I have to like, trust, and become friends with people I do business with. And if I can't make that evolution, then I shouldn't be doing business with them. But it's a very important sequencing. I don't do business with friends. We're even at the point, even though the company was founded by myself and my son, Brandon is actually in a process of spinning out and starting his own business, affiliated but separate from us. Like, your family and your friends are in probably separate relationships from your business. Your business colleagues should become friends, if not feel like family, or you picked the wrong business colleague.
Ooh, I like that. And if you had to pick being liked versus known, you had to hedge your bet on one. Which one matters more, being liked or being known? Ooh.
Yeah, I'm not into infamy. What people are, it would be really easy for me to start throwing stuff out there in social media that would give me a tremendous amount of followers and a tremendous amount of enemies simultaneously. And I could make a good living for a while off the increase in followers, and ultimately the enemies would eat, at least emotionally eat me alive. So, I'm not trying to be infamous. I'm trying to appeal to human beings' humanity.
That's so well thought out. You thought about that. I like that. I hope everybody listened to what he said there. Chris is playing the long, extra long game.
Play a long
Chris, last question I like to ask my guests, and it is sincere. I really try to make conversation with my guests friends and really try to unpack their brains and make them feel like we're talking human to human. But my last question is, what can I do for you? And of course, we're going to plug all your books and newsletters and all that, but what can I sincerely do for you? Our whole show's mandate is to really encourage people to live their full selves on purpose, personally and professionally. And I mean, you drop so much gems, but anything I can do for you.
No, man, you're doing it. I mean, you're spreading how to help people. You're helping me spread how to help people live better lives. And that in and of itself is phenomenal.
Appreciate you, Chris. I got to get you on your way. Any last little mementos you want to leave us with? Other than that, I am indebted to you, my man. I really appreciate you, and I wish you nothing but the best. I'm sure I'll be in contact with you more, though.
Yeah. Just, again, the fireside thing that we're doing now, I'm really excited about that. It's an app. It's a subscription service.
Okay.
You're going to get a year's worth of training. And interactive with me and my entire team. I mean, I think it fills a great gap after you've read the book and taken a master class and, got all the little things you can. When you're really looking to move yourself forward, the fireside thing is something I'm really excited about.
And by the way, when I read this book, so as a stocking stuffer for our clients that we have, I give them some of our merch, but I bought 150 of these. So each one of these always goes into, if we have somebody come on the team or I meet a new client, this book it's absolutely incredible. Like, I have the little cheat sheet. I got a notes app. I got a digital, like I cannot thank you enough. It's truly,
thanks, man.
It's got to be in my top 10 books of all time. At least, even if you don't like to freaking read, just read the book. Sorry. You bet.
It's well written.
Okay. Chris, man, thank you so much. I appreciate you. All I need you to say is, can you just say, my name is Chris Voss and I was just on the Ryan Holtz Show?
My name is Chris Voss and I was just on the Ryan Holtz Show.